As the way of the Rebbe to learn the Hillchos Beit.הבחירה in the days when Metzorim, we have the honor today to have a Choshev in Gemara, namely from the Choshev Melamdim in Cheder, Rav Chosid, Rav Chaim, Boruk, הכהן, טייטלביום will give us some insight into Hillchos Beit.הבחירה. Before that, everybody should give tzedakah b'tzibur. Is the way of the Rebbe, there is pushkas on the table, everybody please give tzedakah. הרב טייטלביום, בבקשה. Yeah, we said it already, not the minyan.
How much time do we have?
Until we have the new
Okay, we're going to speak about two questions today. First of all, the question will be, why was the Kaisel Mizrachi of the Har HaBayis lower than the other walls? The second question will be, where was the exact place of the Mizbeach? One will lead into the other. Okay, the Pasuk writes about the Kohen that was burning the Parah Aduma, when he would be sprinkling the blood of the Parah Aduma. It says, V'hiza al meichach pnei oyel meiv. And the Chachamim learned that he has to be able to see the doorway of the Heichal when he was sprinkling the blood. So they make a cheshbon that if you look from the Har HaMishcha, the mountain that he was bringing the Parah Aduma on, towards the Beis HaMikdash, and even though all the doorways of the Beis HaMikdash were aligned one with the other, he would not be able to see through all the doorways till the Pesach HaHeichal, and that's why they had to lower the Kaisel HaMizrachi. So he looked over the first doorway, and then through the other ones. But if you make the cheshbon, go through the Mishnayos in Yuma in Midais, it doesn't sound like that works, because we have the first, what's it called? The first doorway, with all the doors in the Beis HaMikdash were 20 amas high and 10 amas wide. So we'll focus on the 20 amas height. So you go through the first door was the Har HaBayis, you can see that doorway. Then after that, there was the Seirig, then there was a place called the Chel, an area surrounding the Beis HaMikdash, 10 amas width. There were 12 stairs in the Chel. Each stair was a half an amma height. Right now, all that matters is the height. So from the Har HaBayis to the Ezras Nashim, they'd have to go up those 12 stairs. That means the Ezras Nashim were 6 ames above the rest of the Har HaBayis. Now, after that, they went through the Ezras Nashim. There's before Shari Nikanar. In between the Ezras Nashim and Ezras Yisrael, another 15 round steps. That's another 7.5 ames. So you have to keep cheshbon. We have 6 ames from before. We have now another 7.5 ames. How much are we holding? It's too hard for me to remember. Anyone knows? 13.5. Very good. We have 13.5 ames height already. Okay, now you go a little bit further. We have right before the ulam, the heichal, right before the building of the Beis HaMikdash itself, there's another 6 ames. Another 12 stairs. Each stair is at half an amma height. Another 6 ames. So let's keep cheshbon. 13.5 ames plus 6. 19.5. So that means that the Kohen, which was burning the Parah Aduma, if you look through all the doors, he was looking at the top half a amma of the doorway of the Shar Mizrach. He was able to see it from the top half amma all the way through till the Pesach HaEichel. So the question is, why do you have to lower the Shar Mizrach?
What about the Amaduchan?
Oh, so there's no Amaduchan there. But the Gemara says there's one opinion, which says the opinion of Rabbi ben Yaakov, and he says there was an Amaduchan added, and the Gemara proves from here that the whole Masechta has to be Rabbi ben Yaakov, because if not, they wouldn't have to shorten the Shar Mizrach. So in fact, this halacha that we've shortened the Shar Mizrach is according to Rabbi ben Yaakov, and the reason for it is because he holds there's an Amaduchan. Now in the Gemara there's no mention of it's the Amma before the Duchan. On top of that Amma there were 3 more steps. According to the Gemara, the Rashi learns the Gemara, those 3 steps went up and then went back down. It didn't raise the height of the Beis HaMikdash. So there's only a 1 amma height, so then you have 19 amas plus add the amma duchan. From 19.5 it comes to 20.5, and that blocks out the view. And that's why they have to lower the Shar Mizrach. So again, that's the way the Gemara is learned. If you want to, Rizalman said you have to learn halacha according to the Rambam, because the Maisa we have to follow the Rambam is a plak halacha. The Rambam says that it was actually more than 20.5 amas, because he says the 3 steps of the duchan raised the floor of the Azara another amma and a half. So he says it was 22.5 amas higher than the Har HaBayis. Again, according to the Rambam, the Pesach HaUlam was 22 amas higher, but it was sure above the 20 amas height, and therefore they had to lower Shar Mizrach of the eastern wall of the Har HaBayis. Now, the Gemara challenges this as being needed. You have to say the Gemara follows Rav Elazar ben Azai and there's an amma for the Duchan? It could be there's another reason why we had to lower the Shar Mizrach, and this brings us to the second subject of this discussion. Maybe the reason why they had to lower the eastern wall of the Har HaBayis was because the Mizbeach was blocking the view of the Kohen, which was sprinkling the blood of the Parah Aduma. So we have an opinion brought down in Mishnayos from Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says that the Mizbeach was exactly in the center of the Azara, exactly mechuven opposite the Heichal. That means that you have until, let's go back to the simple, I'm not going to go through those or Blaz of Yaakov. Let's speak about, imagine there's no extra Amma added, so you have 13.5 Amas that you mentioned earlier, from the bottom of the Har HaBayis until the Azara. On that 13.5 Amas you have a Mizbeach. How high is the Mizbeach? We're not going to count the Makom Akronis because that's not blocking anyone's view. So the Mizbeach is how high? So we have 13.5 plus 9, and way over 20. So maybe it was the Mizbeach that was blocking the view, and maybe that's why they had to lower the Sha'ar Mizrach. So the Gemara goes on to explain how it cannot be possible that the Masechta Midas follows the opinion of Blaz ben Yaakov. And here we go through another chunk of Masechta Midas. The Mishnah goes through calculations to describe what happened in every area of the Beis HaMikdash from the Darim side till it's Safin. We know there was 135 Amas along the width of the Azara, and it goes on to explain what it was. Now the Mishnah is described as follows. It starts off telling us how big the ramp was. The ramp of the Mizbeach was 30 Amas. Only some help keeping cheshbon. After the ramp, there was the Mizbeach itself, which was 32 Amas. That's a total of 30 plus 32. No, going from the width of the Azar. So we have 30 plus 32 is 62 Amas. After that, we have the empty space between the Mizbeach and the Tabois, the rings where they would shech the karbanis. So we have 32 plus 8 is how much? 62 plus 8 ends up calculating as 70. Then you have after that 24 amas for the tabois itself. I didn't write down cheshbenis, so I really need help. 94. After that you have 4 amas between the tabois and the shulchan. The place, the shulchanis was where they would clean out the insides of the karbanis before they were brought up on the mizbeach. 98, very good. I hope that's being accurate. After they have another 4 amas between the shulchanis and the small pillars where they would take off the skin. We're going up to 102. Then there's another 8 amas between those pillars and the next wall of the mizbeach, the kaiso tzvaini. That's a total of 110. So we have 135 amas, but the Mishnah only calculates 110 amas what they were for. So again, we have the measurement of the ramp, the mizbeach, the rings, the space between the mizbeach and the rings. We have the space between the rings and the shulchanis, the space between the shulchan and the nanasim, the small beams, and the place between those beams and the wall. All of that calculates only 110. Okay, the details you'll check up after if you want to remember what they were. The question is, what's with those extra 25 ames? So the Mishnah in Midas ends off saying that we divide between the Makim HaKevesh and the Kaisel, the ramp and the southern wall. That place didn't say exactly how much space there was there. So we say we divided between all the way, if you look at this image, all the way to the left, between the ramp and the southern wall, and the place for the Nanasim itself, which the Mishnah didn't say exactly how much space was given there. So to summarize what we just said here, the Mishnah says exact measurements for most of what goes on in the width of the Azara. It skips out saying the exact measurements of what was the space between the southern wall and the ramp. That doesn't say the place of the pillars where they would take off the skin of the karbanis. It doesn't either say there how much space was there. It just says everything else pretty much. And at the end, after saying 110 amas of what it was used for, it says the remaining space, which equals 25, is to be divided between the 2 places that I didn't mention. Now, Rashi, when he's explaining this Gemara, comes across a big issue, which is that it doesn't either say how much space was there for the actual place of the shulchanis. So Rashi says the reason why the Mishnah doesn't tell us how much space the shulchanis took up was because it's so obvious, it doesn't need to mention it. Not only is it so obvious, the Mishnah doesn't even mention it, it's so obvious, the Gemara doesn't need to explain it either. Nothing. It's a pasuk in Yechezkel where it's describing the Beis HaMikdash, and over there it says that the shulchanis were an amma and a half. And note there were 2 rows of 4 tables. If each table is amma and a half, and there's 2 rows of it, so that means it's 3 amas of table itself. You need an amma in between. It's minimum 4 amas. We don't need anyone to tell us that because it's a pasuk. So therefore, Rashi says as follows: so if you have a pasuk, so we know that the makim of the shulchanis is 4 amas, and that means that we have only not 25 amas left at the end that were not recorded, because we used up 4 that Rashi says doesn't even mention clearly in the Mishnah. So therefore, we have 21 amas left. Take 11 and a half, say take 10 and a half, divide that to 21 amas in 2, 10 and a half put between the wall and the ramp, and another 10 and a half amas for the small beams, and that's the way the width of the Mizbeach goes, the width of the Beis HaMikdash goes. Now if you do this calculation, it turns out that the Mizbeach was positioned slightly towards the Darim side of the Azara. And let's do the calculation one more time. We're going to go from the left so it's easy. You have the ramp and the Mizbeach itself was, first of all, before we go on to explain exactly how the Mizbeach was positioned, we have to remember the middle of the base, the middle of the Azara, 135 and divided by 2. The center point of the Azara was Amma number 67 and a half. Again, 135 divided by 2 is 67 and a half. That was the center. The doorway of the Heichel was 10 Amas wide. So that means that it went from Amma number 62 and a half till Amma number 72 and a half. Again, it started 5 Amas before the midpoint and it extended 5 Amas past that. So that's the clearance we're trying to see if the Kain, which is sprinkling the blood from the Paraduma, is able to see. We want to know if the space between Amma number 62 and a half and 72 and a half, is there any space over there that's clear? So now, according to the Cheshvan, Rashi said, let's put 11 and a half Amas all the way on the Dharm side. Empty space between the wall and the ramp. And then we give 62 Amas for the Mizbeach and the ramp. How much will that equal? 10 and a half plus 62. 72 and a half. So that would actually completely block off the doorway, no? So the Gemara here, after saying the whole Cheshvan, to say that, one second, the Gemara here, after it says the whole Cheshvan to describe the Mishnayos and Midas, it turns out that is the Mizbeach blocking the doorway, the entrance, the vision? The Gemara says no. The Mizbeach, although it went all the way to Amma number 72 and a half, still that was only by the Yisaid. The Yisaid went in an Amma, by Sev went in another Amma, so here you got only till 70 and a half. And therefore, those last 2 Ammas of the Pesach Heichel were exposed, and if not for the Amma by the Duchan, that the Azar went up, the Kohen would have been able to see it. Therefore, the Mizbeach definitely was not what was blocking the doorway. It must have been the Amma that Blazav and Yaakov says that there was an extra step there in the middle of the Azar. So again, the Gemara proves that Masechta Midas has to follow Blazav and Yaakov because the reason why the Kaisel Mizrachi, the eastern wall of the Har Bayis was lowered, can't be because the Mizbeach was blocking, as we did the Cheshvan. Now we see the Mizbeach really didn't block out the full view. It blocked out most of the Pesach Heichel, but only 8 Amas of it. 2 Amas of it only went to Amma 70 and a half. The last 2 Amas of the Pesach Heichel were exposed, and therefore it was possible to see if not for that extra Amma in the middle of Azar being there, they would not have to lower the case on HaMizrachi. Okay, that's the way Rashi learns the Gemara. The Rashi, right after he says this, he says, Livi Megamgim. I'm really not sure if this could really be the explanation. Because he, on his own, explained that the Makim HaShulchanis was 4 Ames, based on a pasuk, and he put it into the Cheshvan of the Mishnayos, even though the Mishnayos itself didn't really say it. And he says, really, he would be much more comfortable to say that maybe the Makim HaShulchanis and the Makim HaNanasim, which were really the same basement for Chaim, the pillars and the tables were really part of the same job, to clean out and to take off the skin of the karbanis. Says maybe the Pshat and Mishnah really is that there was 12 and a half, take the extra 20, the Mishnah enumerates 110 Ames, what it was used for. There's 25 extra till we get to 135. Just divide those extra 25 Ames, 12 and a half for both the Nanasim and Shulchanis combined, 12 and a half for the empty space from the Kaisel Deremi, from the southern wall until the beginning of the ramp, and that would be a much simpler way of learning the Mishnayos. Problem with that is, if you're going to say that there's 12 and a half Ames empty space on the southern side of the ramp, let's do the Cheshvan, 12 and a half plus 62, what number will that reach? 74 and a half. Take off 2 Ames because of the Yisaid and the Seiviv, and it's 72 and a half. Amma number 72 and a half blocks out completely the doorway of the Heichel, and therefore that would take away the need for there to be that Amma that the Azara was raised. Maybe the reason they had to lower Kaisel Mizrachi was because the Mizbeach was blocking it. After the Gemara goes that long length to prove that the Mishnayos and Midas goes like a Vazav and Yaakov, that there had to be an extra step there, because if not, the Kohen would be able to look through the doors and see the Pesach HaHeichel. Rashi says, but one second here. This whole arichas of the Gemara seems to not even be proving that point, because it seems that not only was the height of the Azara blocking the view of the Kohen, but the Mizbeach must have been blocking the view as well. If you learn the Mishnah simply that there was a 12 and a half Amma space before the ramp, between the ramp and the southern wall of the Azara. So he goes on to say he heard another explanation from his teacher. I'm not sure what the history of his teacher is, but his name is Mori Tzedek Rabbeinu Yitzchak Rabbi Yehuda Zal, and over there he says that the 25 Amas are not divided equally in half, 12 and a half, 12 and a half. You divide it 12 and 13, which means as follows. He says, when the Mishnah ends off saying the extra Amas divide between the place of the Nanasim and the space between the Kevesh and the Kaisel Dremi, the place of the small pillars and the space between the ramp and the wall, it's not saying you divide them equally. You divide but 12 ames between the ramp and the wall, and 13 ames for the walls and for the tables and the beams. Why does he say, what's the cheshbon? What's the reason to not divide them equally? He says, simple. The tables and the beams were workspace. Workspace, it's used, so it makes sense to give them a bit extra space to work with. The area between the ramp and the wall was empty. It wasn't used at all. So make that a bit smaller. And according to this, let's try the cheshbon one more time. 12 plus 62 is, again? 74, and you have to minus 2 ames, one for the Seid, one for the Seviv. How much do you end up with? Again? 72. And the Pesach HaHeichel went from Amma 62 and a half to 72 and a half. We had the extra half an Amma. So it's great. The steps going up go. See the flow of the diuk of the calculations. The ground of the Pesach HaHeichel was raised up 19 and a half ames from the floor of the Har HaBayis, and the Mizbeach was blocking out 9.5 of the width of the doorway. So you have a half a amma by half a amma corner space that the Kohen can see right into, and because that space is there, therefore we have to say the entire Masechta Midas follows a blessed of Yaakov, and there was another step added in the center of the Azar. You raise it up an extra amma, and that's what blocked the view. It couldn't have been the Mizbeach. Anyhow, after Rashi says his whole arichos, he says, but really I don't really feel comfortable with that pirush either. Because if you are starting to not divide it equally, you make it 12 and 13, might as well make it maybe 10 and 15. If you make it 5 and 20, it says if the Mishnah just says you divide it, if the Mishnah doesn't specify how it's divided, it got to be exactly in half. Therefore, he falls back in his first pirush that you have to say that the place for the shulchanis didn't have to be mentioned because it's a clear pasuk in Yechezkel, and therefore it's only 21 ames that were extra, and you divide it 10 and a half, 10 and a half, and then it all fits well. Anyhow, after the Rashi goes at this whole long Arichos, it's a page of Gemara which has so many Rashis, it's very long to go through. We have a Taisus, and Taisus pretty much mapped up the whole Rashi. He says, what's Rashi even wasting his time with all these calculations? He says, there's only 3 shittas about where the Mizbeach could have been. It's either in the center, Kulei Bedarim, Kulei B'Mizrach, Kulei Bedarim or Kulei B'Tzafin. There's no fourth opinion in Shas about where the Mizbeach could have been. So he says, once you see from these cheshbonis, clearly the Mizbeach wasn't directly in the center. It has to be pushed at least slightly towards the Darim side. So therefore, which a shita holds the Mizbeach Kuli B'Darim, it's Blessed Ben Yaakov, the same shita. And if it's Blessed Ben Yaakov, you got to push the Mizbeach Kuli, and it was completely in the Darim. And therefore, really, listen how it worked with the Blessed Ben Yaakov. The amount of space that there was between the Kaisel Darim and the ramp was only 5.5 ames. And according to that, 5.5, let's do 5.5 plus 62. 67, no. 67 and a half, one more time. no, let's try again. 5.5 plus 62, 67 and a half. And that would, then the end of the Mizbeach would be at the half point of the Azar. The Azar is 135 amas. So what half of 135 is? 67 and a half. And it would be Kulei Bedarim. That's the way, well, Maskana, you have to learn. It's fine, the Yesod ended by the half point. So therefore, the whole thing ends. And that's the Maskana, the way it has to be. And so the whole cheshbon of how do we know that is it 12 and 12? So you never had to have a minute to divide the extra amas half and half. It never goes half and half. You have to push this. Once it can't be that the Mizbeach was in the center of the Azar, it has to be that the Mizbeach was pushed all the way down to the Darim side. And the way to divide, Al Karfach, you have to learn that the way to divide the extra amas that are being divided is 5.5 between the wall and the beginning of the ramp, and then the extra 19.5 were used for the Mizbeach, for the Nanosim, for the Shulchanis. You have plenty of space there to work. Now, interestingly, after this whole Gemara and the Arichas and the Machlekes and Rashi and where exactly the Mizbeach was, if you look in the Rambam says that the Mizbeach was not like any of the 3 shittas that Taisa says that exist. And the Taisa says you can't be Mechadish no shita. Apparently the halacha is like none of those 3. And the Rambam holds there is a 4th shita. And this 4th shita holds that the Mizbeach was 12, the ramp began 12.5 ames away from the wall. And it blocked out completely the view of the Kohen, and you don't need the extra amma. But yet, still the Rambam holds there was that extra amma. What's the hechech of the Rambam? I'm not sure, but that's the maskana of the sugya.
Shkoyach. Just